Two Visions, 1984. A shade of a man accosted Ross Davy in the dark of the pre-dawn morning on September 12, 1984. Ross had just left the Roscoe Diner, his only planned stop on the way to Binghamton from Liberty, New York. "Sir, I really need to get to deposit. Are you going west?" said the stranger. "Sorry, pal, I'm in a hurry," replied Ross, walking hastily past the dim outline of the man. The shadow stepped forward, grabbing Ross by the arm, and pleaded with him. "Sir, I need a ride west. You can have all of the money in my wallet." Ross shook the man off and tried to look him in the eyes, assuming he was drunk or on drugs. "I don't want your money. I'm a reporter for the Liberty Gazette, and I need to get to Binghamton within the hour so I can be where I need to be for that idiot Reagan's visit." Ross began walking away. "Please, sir, I'm desperate." The reporter paused, looking back over his shoulder and eyed the man. "Fine, come on." The pair traveled Route 17 west as the sun crept over the foothills of the Catskills. It was an unusually chilly morning for early September, and they passed through intermittent fog as they rounded hills and ran beside misty creeks and rivers. This section of the highway was unique as homes and driveways met the road itself, and there were few entrance and exit ramps. An uncomfortable silence had settled between Ross and his unnamed passenger until Ross was startled from his road trance by the sudden jerking of the man beside him. Ross recognized the malady as a seizure and immediately pulled the car to the side of the road. He knew that the best he could do was sit, watch, and wait for the episode to end. The man's skin had now lost all color. His eyes flickered madly, and he gulped for air as his nose bled onto the seatbelt. "Okay, you're having a seizure, buddy. Just try and breathe," Ross stated, more to comfort himself than his passenger. "What's your name, guy?" The man continued seizing. Soon he was shaking violently, pressing his head against the side window. Ross began to worry at the length of the seizure, when suddenly the pale man beside him slumped over. "Are you all right?" asked Ross, following a stretch of silence. The other man responded after another wordless minute. "My name's Saul." "Are you prone to seizures? We have a woman who works at the press who—" Saul cut him off. "It's never been that clear." "What do you mean?" asked Ross. "Just now I had two separate visions, but they were somehow connected." "Huh?" Saul stared ahead blankly. "Either the president is going to get shot today, or someone is going to die in your car." The certainty with which Saul made this prophetic statement unsettled Ross. The seasoned reporter had a nose for bullshit, and knew the hallmarks of an unhinged person, yet despite his comfort, he felt no immediate need to rid himself of his passenger. "If you say so, pal." Ross looked the man over again and grinned as he pulled the car back onto the road. "How about we get to deposit? That is where you're headed, right?" Saul made no response as they drove on, the post-dawn sun now shining brilliantly. But it wasn't a minute before they came upon an overturned car in a ditch just in front of an abandoned motel. Ross pulled off the highway and into a small broken lot. "This doesn't look good," stated Ross. "No, you have to help him." Ross nodded at the sallow man beside him and got out. He ran down into the ditch and found the driver still belted, secure yet accessible from the broken window. "I think I can get you out of here, pal." The driver mumbled something indiscernible in reply. Ross unfastened the man and removed him through the bent window frame. "Saul, help me get this guy to the car." He looked around for the other man. "Saul!" But Saul made no reply. The injured man was able to stumble along with Ross's support. Ross got him out of the ditch and into his back seat. As he lay him down, the man begged Ross to try and help his friend. "There's someone else in that car?" asked Ross. "My friend was riding with me," the man said, straining to talk. "Okay." Ross ran back down into the ditch and dove onto his stomach in the cold, damp dirt. A wallet lay open just beside him, bills spilling out onto the ground. The car was leaning more on the passenger side, and he knew there was little chance he would find another living soul inside. Can you hear me? Ross called into the wreckage, attempting to see into the crushed portion of the vehicle from the rear passenger window. Oh, God! How could it be? Ross spied the face of the clearly deceased passenger, the eyes devoid of expression, mouth agape, nose still trickling blood. The head was severed, and it belonged to the man he had been riding with only 5 minutes prior. It was unmistakably Saul. Unsure of what was transpiring, Ross returned to his car. Saul, he's dead. The man in his back seat only moaned in response. We'll get you to Memorial Hospital in Binghamton. Ross drove madly, racing to try and preserve the man's life. He saw no other cars or trucks for miles. It was just him, the road, and a dying man in his back seat. We're only 10 minutes from the hospital. Hold on, pal. The man in the back had been unresponsive for most of the drive. Ross thought of Saul and his ghastly prophecy. He was supposed to be in Binghamton to cover the president for the Gazette. It had been the most important thing in the world to him only an hour or so earlier that morning. Now he could only think of getting the stranger to the hospital. Ha! Either the president's going to get shot today, or this guy's going to die in my back seat, said Ross, gloomily knowing and disappointed by the likeliest outcome. If I were in your shoes, I'd certainly be hoping that the president takes a bullet. Soon enough, Ross was in Binghamton and had pulled into the emergency room drive. He jumped out and waved to the nurses and attendants inside for help with his passenger. The staff quickly got a stretcher out to the car and tended to the injured man. Sir, please park in the lot across the road, said one of the paramedics. Oh yes, of course, replied Ross. He hesitated for a moment, thinking that he could still make it to the campaign rally in time to get a good position for the presidential visit. His conscience got the better of him, however, and he parked the car across the street and returned to the hospital's waiting room. He knew he would have to answer questions regarding the man he had only met that morning, and whose name he didn't even know. Hours passed while Ross waited for news of the injured man. When a uniformed police officer and 2 hospital security men came out to see Ross, he feared the worst. He's dead, isn't he? The officer ignored the question. Your name is Ross Davey, correct? Ross nodded. Can you come back with us for a few questions? Ross complied. They led him to a small room just past the main emergency area and seated him at a table across from the officer. Listen, I don't really know anything about the guy other than I found him in his car in a ditch on 17, between Roscoe and Deposit. Ross began to worry when the officer didn't immediately respond. I'm a reporter for the Liberty Gazette, and I'm supposed to be at the rally this morning. We searched your car, Mr. Davey, replied the officer evenly. What the hell do you mean you searched my car? I need to see the president today. He got up as if to leave. The 2 security officers grabbed Ross and made him sit back down. Easy, easy, Mr. Davey. The officer motioned to another policeman who had appeared outside the door. A stack of loose typewritten pages was tossed on the table between Ross and the officer. What's this? You don't recognize your confession, Mr. Davey? Stated the officer as he leafed through the pages. Of course, we all discovered your rifle and ammunition. Ross's face fell. The compartment in his truck was ideal for concealing his long-range rifle and rounds, and his manifesto had been tucked away safely in his locked glove compartment. How did... The officer interrupted Ross. Yes, it was all well hidden, and we assumed that your passenger was just delirious when we searched the trunk the first time and found nothing. But we're obligated to investigate something of this nature thoroughly and had a locksmith open your glove box. What do you mean he was delirious? Ross sighed, knowing he was caught. How's the guy I brought in doing? He passed away not long after he was admitted, but before he died, he said that he heard you say that the president was going to get shot. He was insistent and wanted us to know that the president was going to get shot today. What? Ross then realized that the man in the back seat must have heard him when he mockingly repeated Saul's prophecy. So we searched your car, and now we're here. The officer motioned to his uniformed partner, who handcuffed Ross. We'll continue this conversation down at the station, Mr. Davy.